This is John Thomson, who works on children and adults, and he's an interventionalist. How long have you been around now, John? In the
Too long.
Too long. A long time.
25, 30 years, something like that. Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that this theatre's changed your working life.
It has
and
indeed,
the
yeah.
patient's life as well. Yeah, we just would like to hear how that's happened.
Okay.
Since it opened in, was it March, April?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. So, welcome everybody. You are all very welcome. I think it's the first time I've ever done a presentation off a sheet. I always do it off the cuff. So there we are. So I wrote this over the last couple of nights. So you're very welcome, and thank you all for coming here today. You know, it feels like a family really, in a sense, because everyone's contributed so much to this project. It's been a long time coming, but it really is an absolutely fabulous facility, an absolutely astounding facility really. And I'm the lead cardiologist for the service, and I've been in Leeds for nearly 30 years on and off. I've had periods in other places, but by and large I've been here for the last 30 years. And I think that this hybrid lab, the opening of this lab, has been probably the single proudest moment in my career. You know, I think it really is a fabulous achievement, and I think it's moved our service onto a completely different level. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. I think it's an incredible achievement for which we're really grateful to you all. And I think what I'd like to do is I'm only going to talk for 5 or 10 minutes, but I'm just going to tell you a little story about the origins of this specialty, what we try to do, why it is that people come into this specialty, and the nuts and bolts really of treating children with congenital heart disease, because I think it'll give you an idea of what it's all about and what this will allow us to do. If you were unfortunate enough to be born with a congenital heart problem in the 1950s, you faced a short life. Almost every child born in the 1950s with a congenital heart problem died before they reached adulthood. And it wasn't only short, but it was very limited. Often these children were crippled with blueness, with cyanosis. They were confined to wheelchairs for most of their short lives. And it really was a terrible burden, bearing in mind that congenital heart disease is about 1% of live births, and that's a really significant number. So the first thing, I've got a string of things to show you, just to take you on a bit of a journey. Now, this is a DVD, and this is a DVD called Something the Lord Made. It's a Hollywood movie, and it's about two people, well, three actually, but the two main protagonists in this movie are Alfred Blalock, who was a vascular surgeon, learnt his trade in the Second World War. There was a huge increase in the technical ability to treat vascular injuries in the Second World War because of gunshots, etc., etc. And the other person was a lady called Helen Taussig. Helen Taussig was in the first intake to medical school in the US and the United States, to Harvard. She was dyslexic. By the end of her career she was deaf. She couldn't hear the baby's hearts by the end. She felt the hearts rather than listen to them. And they came into this specialty and saw these children dying, and came up together with the idea of using the artery to the arm to connect to the lung artery to increase blood flow to the lungs. And that operation was named after the two of them. It was called the Blalock-Taussig shunt. And that was the origin of not just treatment for congenital heart disease, but treatment for heart disease per se. So up to that point there was no treatment at all of any significance, and so that was time zero in 1950 with 100% mortality. It's actually an even more interesting story, because in there was also elements of slavery. There was Alfred Blalock's lab assistant was a black man. In those days he wasn't allowed to go to medical school, and it's said that this guy was actually the technical genius behind the operation, and he did a lot of the work. And so this story is mainly about that, about Alfred Blalock's assistant. So that's the origin, and that's the DVD. You can find it if you go on Netflix. It's actually not a bad film. It's worth watching. I think Denzel Washington's in it. So that's the first thing. Now this, then, and from here, from that original operation, we then move into further advances in surgery. So all of this was done open surgery developed, incredible advances. Walton Lillihigh was a young man in his 1930s, a cardiac surgeon. He worked out how to repair heart problems, but he couldn't stop the heart to get in to do the operation because of blood flow. And he actually came up with the idea of cross circulation. He used the mum as the oxygenator for the baby. So the mum breathed and pumped the blood and allowed him to do an operation. So that was the next step. And then from there, from milk churn technology in the dairy belt in the United States came this sort of thing. So this is a bypass machine. So you've probably already seen this, and this has obviously been donated very, very kindly during this process. This is a bypass machine, and that's a direct descendant of that technology, and really that then allowed us to start doing other operations. And over the period of 30 years, the mortality rate went from 100% to 15%. And that's without any major randomized trials, without any clever, nice, without anything other than bravery and invention and trying hard and working on first principles. So it's an amazing story. Now, we were still left with vulnerable babies, and actually if there was an Achilles heel with bypassing those early days, it was that little children often did quite badly. And this is a little bit of a leap, but this is a photograph of the world's first ductal stent. So my teacher, my colleague John Gibbs, who was my mentor, came up with the idea of going all the way back to first principles, and instead of doing a shunt, to put a metal cage into the baby's own connection to keep them alive. And this was a world first, and that's a photograph of it that I found in my office just to bring up to show you. And that was done in Leeds at Killingbeck Hospital. And that procedure was very, very difficult in the first instance because we were dealing with equipment like this. So we had babies of this size, and we had balloons and technology of that size, and hearts of this size, the size of a plum, and balloons that were enormous. And so, you know, John managed to do this work, but it didn't really take off until the last 10 years or so, when things have become miniaturized. And I think that's where this sort of facility starts to come in, because it all starts to come together, and we're now able to do this sort of thing much better, with much better equipment, in much better facilities. And in fact, about 12 months ago, with my younger colleague Jamie Bentham, we showed that using stents in this situation is generally safer for these babies than having an open heart operation. So it sort of went full circle. So that's those things. Last week we did a procedure on a baby that weighed the same as a can of soup. So a child of 550 grams had a valve ballooned in here on this table last week, and that child came from the neonatal unit, was born at 26 weeks gestation, and had a procedure done. And again, this sort of facility allows us to do that. So that's where we're moving. We're able to treat kids of this size, not all of them, you know, and we do need to do better, but that's what we're trying to do. And then finally, I just wanted to show you this as well, because I think this is very easy to understand, and again, I think it shows the wonderful partnership we've had with Children's Heart Surgery Fund, who've supported us over many, many years. This is a print of somebody's heart. So this is actually an adult with a complicated hole in the heart, and we now have the facility to print the heart and actually have a look and work out whether or not we're able to do procedures to take this heart effectively and have it in our hands. You can even print a material that allows you to put a stitch in if you want. You can change the colours of the different vessels, you can do all sorts of things. But this is from an MRI scan, and this is on our 3D printer that the charity bought us. And so this is where we are now. We've gone from everyone dying in 1950 with children in wheelchairs to that in places like this. And we wouldn't have got there if it wasn't for people like you that have helped us. So really, just to conclude, I really want to say that you're all a part of this story, and we, our parents, our patients, are very, very grateful to you all. We're extremely thankful, and we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you very much for what you've done for us and for the children and for their families.
Well, thank you, John.